Cue the cricket noises, everybody. Today we're out in the imitation wilderness in Southern California because we're taking a look at the latest super secret Subaru model. Actually, that's really just being facetious because this is probably the worst kept secret in Subaru's lineup. This is the new Forester Wilderness, the second generation of the Forester Wilderness. When Subaru launched this model of the Forester about a year ago, conspicuously absent was the Wilderness trim. Now, for 2025, you could still buy a Wilderness, but you were actually buying the previous generation Forester Wilderness, and that's because some of the changes they had cooked up for this generation weren't quite ready yet. Up front, you'll notice that it looks different than the rest of the Forester lineup. We get a unique grille here. We, of course, get the orange accents up front. Those indicate the functional recovery locations that we find in every Wilderness model. Actually, they indicate more than that because the orange accents also indicate the functional locations of things like cargo tie downs on the front. We get some underbody protection. It has been expanded underbody protection versus the first generation of the Forester Wilderness. Of course, we get full LED headlights here as well. We get the black accent on the hood in this model. Now, if we come around the side, you'll see some of the other changes here, including a slightly higher amount of clearance, so 9.3 inches, up about 1/10 of an inch versus the last Forester Wilderness. Slightly wider tires. They're still Yokohama Geolandar all-terrains, but they're now 235 width. The design of the wheel arches and the plastics, very similar to the rest of the Forester lineup, but of course butched up a little bit for the Wilderness. These are some extra gold accents that I mentioned earlier. Those indicate the tie-down locations for cargo. So there are actually some hooks on the inside of that area for tying things down. And we have an 800-pound roof load limit now in the Forester Wilderness. So that's upgraded over the regular model. Back here we get the symmetrical all-wheel drive badging. Sorry for the tight quarters. Hopefully Travis isn't gonna slip on the hillside as we come around to the back. The back of the Forester definitely looks a little bit different. Now, back here we have Forester embossed in the tailgate, or sorry, the hatch, and then down here we have Subaru embossed on the lower bumper. Let me know what you think about that. Opinions have been a little bit divided about that. I think it actually looks pretty good. Again, recovery hook locations. Now, these are not the same kind of big D-hooks that we find in some Fords and some Jeep models. These are places where you can screw in the recovery hook. So for instance, if we pop open the hatch in the back, we actually might as well check this out anyway. Back here we find a full-size spare tire technically, because it's not a compact, but it's not the same tire or the same size as the tires on the vehicle. These are Bravo all-terrain tires in a 225/60/17. Now here is the recovery hook. You can also get, of course, aftermarket recovery hooks if you want a bigger shackle on those. I've seen a ton of those around. Basically what you do is you just knock the cover off, you screw this in, and then you can pull the car out in any of the four corners. I do appreciate that because it does mean easier recovery if you are off-roading your Forester, and versus other vehicles in this segment that have no recovery locations where you'd be left to just try and pull on a wheel or some other portion of the vehicle's underbody. This is a far more elegant solution, while also not having those chunky hooks that may affect pedestrians if you were to run into little Bobby or little Susie out there on the road. Crash protection is the big reason that a lot of car companies are not really into those big chunky hooks. Now let's take a look at the interior design changes because there are a few going on in here. The first one you'll probably notice is the Subaru Wilderness badging there on the door, kind of like a clothing tag, kind of a cool touch. The orange stitching and the new two-tone interior that we find unique in this particular model. We also find the gold accents on the steering wheel. Basically the same general seat design that we find in the rest of the Forester lineup, but with Wilderness tweaks, like the Subaru Wilderness logo embossed on the head restraint there, and the unique texturing to this vegan interior. Yes, this is not leather. This is the same imitation leather product that we find in other Subarus, of course, with the Wilderness touches. Subaru says that a lot of their customers are interested in a more vegan interior, and also this could be slightly more durable than some of those standard leather options that we find in the competition. We find different texturing right here on that center console. And if I hop in the car and close the door, we can take a look at the dashboard here, which is very similar to the rest of the Forester lineup in terms of its general shape. We have some different texturing and, of course, different accents there. It's kind of gold accents on that plastic insert. But the big difference is not in the center where we find the same infotainment system, but over here on the driver's side where we find the same full LCD instrument cluster that we recently saw in the WRX. And of course, we're also going to get in the Forester Hybrid. This is going to feature not just some all-terrain looks there, we get some dial views, and if I click the button on the steering wheel, we get full screen mapping, and this can use the mapping from your smartphone as well. So Apple CarPlay in 2-screen mode, it can do that also. If I move in the steering column there, you can see we get the orange accents on the steering wheel on the bottom there, and then here are the controls for that multifunction LCD cluster. Other than that, the rest of the dashboard design is basically the same as the current Forester on sale. No head-up display or anything like that there. And the general layout of the dashboard is very, very similar. And the back seats, again, very much the same as the rest of the Forester lineup, except that we get the differing trim for the Forester Wilderness with those different accents, 2 big cup holders there, and we still get tons and tons of legroom. Generous legroom figures and an upright seating position are 2 things I have always loved about the Forester, and even though this is not quite as Pope-mobile as Foresters have been in the past, there's still a ton of room in the front and in the back. In fact, if you're looking for an accommodating vehicle, especially for rear-facing child seats or taller passengers in the rear, this is about as accommodating as something significantly bigger, like a Honda Passport. I have a ton of legroom with that driver's seat comfortably adjusted for me. And even with the taller person up front, if I scoot over to this side, there's still a ton of legroom left. Again, really you have to work up into something like a Passport or an Atlas Cross Sport to get more legroom on the inside than this. Even though on paper it looks somewhat similar to a CR-V or RAV4, there's significantly more usable room in a Forester, whether you're taking a look at the Forester Wilderness, the new hybrid model, or just the regular trim. There's just a lot more room on the inside. Under here we find basically the same 2.5-liter 4-cylinder boxer engine we find in the rest of the Forester lineup. So if you were hoping that the Forester Wilderness would get the 2.5-liter turbo from the Outback Wilderness, well, you may be a little bit disappointed. On the other hand, we get additional capability thanks to the more aggressive final drive ratio, the heavy-duty cooling system, and of course the heavy-duty rear differential, which allows more power to be sent to the rear more often. And we get Subaru's latest electronic control systems for the stability and traction control, the dual mode X mode system, which is going to use the brakes to send power left and right. It's then going to use the clutch pack in the transmission to send power front and rear. But another thing I've always liked about the Subaru all-wheel drive system, or the Subaru drivetrain generally, is if you come in for a closer look for the details, the boxer engine obviously means the center of gravity is going to be lower than competition that's this high off the ground, but Subaru has nice touches like positioning the alternator really high on the engine. Also, we have the air conditioning compressor over there, nice and high as well. So if you are fording a stream, you're worried about mud intrusion, etc., you do have a little bit less of a worry due to the design of this engine. Now, we don't know pricing at this point in time, but you can expect the Forester Wilderness to stick pretty close to the outgoing Wilderness model in terms of its MSRP. As with the previous generation Forester Wilderness, the new one I think is a really great value. It gives you a ton of off-road capability without going to extremes like we find in a Grand Cherokee, and it's roomier than something like a Bronco Sport, which is probably going to be similarly priced but not similarly sized. The Bronco Sport, it has a pretty practical upright and boxy format, but it's a subcompact crossover. It actually competes with the Crosstrek Wilderness, to be perfectly honest. This has significantly more legroom and headroom in the back, tons of legroom and headroom in the front, the more upright position, etc. We also find nice touches like the high roof load capacity. It's going to be a lot less expensive than something like a Grand Cherokee though. So if you're looking for that kind of off-road capability and you don't need locking axles front and rear, you might want to check out something like this and you could save an awful lot of cash. That has really been the Forester Wilderness, and the entire Wilderness lineup's mission has been to be this middle road between the average soft road or average crossover and something more rugged like a Grand Cherokee. Subaru is pretty upfront that this is not a Grand Cherokee competitor. It's not a competitor to anything with true lockers or a low ratio mode, etc. But it gives you a lot of the capability you find in vehicles like that, thanks to its high ground clearance, decent approach, breakover, and departure angles, and a reasonable amount of power under the hood. Now, the horsepower, it's not going to set anybody's hair on fire, and it is driving through a continuously variable automatic transmission, which isn't exactly my favorite, but if you want to get further down that trail, you want to stick a roof tent on top, you really spend a lot of time bicycling or kayaking or doing that kind of outdoor activity, this is a really great fit without breaking the bank. And again, even though we don't know pricing, it's probably going to stick pretty close to the outgoing Wilderness model. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comments section below, and if you would like something with a little bit less capability, but certainly more fuel economy, you should check out the new Forester Hybrid. It gets more horsepower, 194 horsepower, thanks to its new planetary power split hybrid system, and it's going to get 35 miles per gallon, so significantly better fuel economy than this Forester Wilderness, without sacrificing any of the interior room. Really, the only downside for that model is the lack of the spare tire. Be sure to check out that video if you haven't already done so. Let us know what you think of the Forester Wilderness, and should Subaru spend a little bit more money next time and maybe give us something like a locking rear differential? I think that would actually be pretty cool, and it would take the Wilderness to even the next level, because if you want more underbody protection, really big, hefty skid plates because you want to go rock crawling or something like that, clearly that's not this, but you know, it could be in the next generation. Let me know what y'all think. See you later.